Good morning and welcome to Tuesday's devotions and to the second last month of the year. That sounds absolutely crazy and really scary, but I think there are some people who are done with 2025. And I want to spend the last couple of weeks before we start to focus on preparation for Christmas looking at what the Bible teaches about good business practice, godly business practice. Now, many of you who watch these devotions are in business. You either work for yourselves or you work for a boss or a company. And I want to take some time just to focus on what the Bible teaches about godly business practice. God says to us in Proverbs, "The Lord detests dishonest scales, but accurate weights find favor with him." Now, you need to take yourself back in time to when trade and bartering were the norm. And when you go into a market and you would ask for a certain quantity of a product, it would be weighed out for you on a scale. So if you needed a kilo of flour, it never came in a carefully marked packet, but rather the man selling flour would dip his scoop into some stone ground flour, that of course was the only kind at that point, pour it into a container, and then it was placed on a scale. And on the other side of a scale, a rock weighing precisely a kilogram would be placed. And the idea was that he would either fill in or take out until the rock and the container balanced equally. Now, you can see how there are in this whole process a number of elements that could lend themselves to corruption. I mean, first of all, the container of flour that is placed on the scale had to be accounted for in the weighing, because it didn't weigh nothing. It weighed something, rather like, I don't know if you ever go to buy biltong and they have those plastic hooks through them. I always make sure you take the plastic hook out before they weigh the biltong, because I don't really want to pay for a plastic hook that I'm not going to get, and I don't want to pay for biltong prices for a plastic hook. But the stone itself, again, on the other hand, which was supposed to weigh 1 kilogram, or whatever weight it was supposed to weigh, needed to weigh exactly that weight. Now, any good merchant would carry a number of different rocks or stones that would weigh different weights, so that if you wanted half a kilo, he could give you that. If you wanted, 400 grams, he could give you that, and so on and so forth. But each of those stones or rocks had to weigh exactly what he said they weighed. In fact, there was actually a measurement called the King's Standard, by which each of these rocks would be tested every now and again, and they needed to be exactly what the merchant said they weighed. And this verse echoes what's taught in Leviticus chapter 19, which says, "Do not use dishonest standards when measuring length, weight, or volume. Your scales and weights must be accurate. I am the Lord your God who brought you up out of Egypt." That's Leviticus 19:35 and 36. And there are a number of verses throughout Proverbs that speak about the fact that the merchant needs to make sure that he used very accurate weights or stones. Now, you may think to yourself, now what does this have to do with business? But of course, we don't use stone weights anymore. But the principle being taught here is one that says that as a business person, everything you do needs to be honest and upfront. There's no room for deception of any kind. And that means that in every area that you deal with, make sure that you're being scrupulously honest. It means that people need to be able to trust you completely. Even in those areas of which they have no knowledge, they need to be able to make sure that you have their best interests at heart and that their best interests are served. Any attitude that says, I can take a shortcut here and no one will know about it, is one that Proverbs and God would say is really not on. It means that when you're working for someone else, it requires brave and courageous people to make sure that you're completely honest with customers, because you cannot lie for your boss. If there's fault, even mentioning, or if there's a fault somewhere and not mentioning that, is as good as lying, because God wants you to be completely honest. So as you head into this week, take a careful look at how you function in your work environment and ask yourself this question: am I being honest in everything I do? Do I give my boss the best possible service? And do I make sure that I always treat my customers with absolute honesty? God bless you, and may you have the most amazing week and a very blessed work week.